Hey guys, it's Clay Hayes, and today we're going to talk about how to make a survival bow from a green tree to finished bow in 2 days. Now before we get started, I want to mention a couple of resources that you might be interested in. If you're into bow building, I've got a book called The Traditional Bowyer's Handbook that covers bow building from start to finish. We cover all sorts of different woods, everything from Osage and yew to eastern red cedar, black locust, all sorts of different stuff. If you want things in a video format, of course, you've got the YouTube channel here that's got all sorts of bow building and traditional archery information. But then I've also got a site where I'm posting exclusive content that you're not going to find anywhere else. And that is my Patreon site. You can find that at patreon.com/Clay Hayes. All right, so the bow that I have right here in my hand is an eastern red cedar bow. And I actually made this bow at the 2018 Oklahoma Self Bow Jamboree. Now, when I showed up at the Jamboree, I didn't have a bow, and I wanted to try something just a little bit different. So what I did was just grab a hatchet, go out into the woods, which is absolutely covered with eastern red cedar, and find the straightest, kind of small diameter eastern red cedar that I could, and went ahead and chopped that down. Now, the reason that I chose eastern red cedar is twofold. One, it's plentiful. It absolutely covers this place up, and eastern red cedar is actually a juniper, and you can find some species of juniper everywhere from Florida to Washington State, the Southwest, everywhere. I mean, this stuff is all over the place, and so no matter where you're at in the country, you're going to be able to find some relative to eastern red cedar. The second reason that I chose eastern red cedar is because it has a pretty low initial moisture content. When I first cut this tree and stuck the moisture meter into the wood, it was only about 20% moisture content. And after a day of drying and just kind of holding it over the fire, I was able to get it down to around 16% after 1 day. So after I harvested this tree, I just went ahead and come back and hung out at camp and just roughed this bow out and did, I'd say 95% of the work with just a hatchet. Just roughed the bow out and got it pretty well to shape. Now, one of the characteristics of eastern red cedar is it tends to be pretty good in compression, but it's terrible in tension, meaning that it has a weak back. And so it really needs to be backed with something. So what I did was go over to Mike Yancey's booth and I grabbed some rawhide strips, and I came back and just went ahead and rawhide backed this bow. Now, in a survival situation, if you're stuck out in the woods somewhere, you're probably not going to be walking around with rawhide strips in your back pocket. And so you're going to be somewhat limited in that respect, but there's a couple of other options that you have to back this thing. If you have a belt on, you could probably split that belt. If it's a sewn together belt, you could probably split that belt and back it with your belt. If you can catch some fish and make some fish glue, you could glue it down. If you can't do that, you could probably, and I haven't tried this, but I speculate that you could just tie it to the back of the bow, because it's not really the glue that has anything to do with the backing's function. It's just that the backing is on the bow and it doesn't move. And so if you bound it with yucca or some other natural plant material every 3 to 4 inches and just tied it tightly to the back of the bow, I think that that would work just fine. Now, this was in Oklahoma. The moisture, or the relative humidity, was very low. It was windy, and so the rawhide on this bow was pretty much cured out within just a few hours. I went ahead and unwrapped it. It's still a little bit soft, but you face it towards the sun and it'll be dry in no time.
Yeah, it's sucked down to the wood right now.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Set that in the sun for a little bit longer, should be ready to go. And trimmed the rawhide to the back of the bow, and then the next day when the sun came out, I went ahead and just set it in the sun, and just to make sure that the rawhide was completely cured out. There we go. And then I started in on the tillering process. And tillering the bow didn't take a whole lot of time. I basically just used a pocket knife to tiller it. You could certainly use a stone flake if you wanted to. But by the end of that second day, I was shooting this bow. All right, man.
How's it looking?
Check it out.
Yep.
Look all right?
Looks good. Looks like the bottom one's coming around a little bit more than upper them. If anything, maybe just a touch or two there.
Right here.
Yeah. How's it feeling weight-wise?
It feels pretty good. It's probably 48 maybe.
How about flipping it over? I'd shoot it like that. The string favor one side or the other.
No, it's right down the middle.
Look perfect like that.
Yeah. All right, I'll shoot it like that then. Thing's got some gnarly wrist slap. Now I was shooting this bow by the end of the second day, and I knew that the bow was gonna take a lot of string follow, and I knew that it was not gonna be an efficient bow, and I'll go ahead and tell you, this is not a very good bow. I mean, it's got about 2 inches of string follow. It's got some pretty gnarly wrist strap or wrist slap because it is so long. I made it long just to make it a little safer. You know, in a survival situation, you're really not trying to push every ounce of performance out of a bow like I do here in my shop. I have the luxury of that here at the shop. But if you're in a survival situation, you're just trying to get something that's gonna get you by. And this one absolutely certainly would, from green tree to deadly weapon in 2 days. I don't think you can complain about that at all. So I hope you learned something from the video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. That really helps to drive these videos. But with that, I'd like to thank everybody that signed up for the Patreon page, and if you're into bow building, certainly go to patreon.com/clayhays and just check it out. I've got a ton of exclusive content that deals with bow building that you're not gonna find anywhere else. I've got videos on how to make a 2-piece takedown bow, how to make or how to take propeller twist out of bows, how to make hickory bows, and then in the future we're going to be covering a lot of other stuff on that platform. So with that, I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.